There's been a lot of talk lately about a Nintendo Switch Pro or a new version of the Nintendo Switch coming, and I haven't really talked about it too much. I talked about it a few months ago when rumors started surfacing, and basically I'll reiterate what I've said before. If Nintendo makes any changes to hardware, they will they won't affect how games run on the system. What they will affect are things like how good of a screen do we have? How much battery length do we get? And the way that they would change those things is by changing the internals in ways not to make the system more powerful, but to make the system more efficient. And recently, people have been talking again about the Nintendo Switch Pro. And like I said, I haven't talked about it much, but somebody asked Reggie Fils-Aimé about it. He's the president of Nintendo of America, and he had a very important quote that I'm going to read to you now. This is from T3.com, which I'd never heard of before, but this is the quote. It says, "The current execution of Nintendo Switch with the Joy-Con and all of the capabilities is the focus for Nintendo. This should allay fears from potential customers that their brand new Switch would be outdated in a matter of months." So I don't feel like Nintendo is going to bring out a new Switch in 2019 at all. Like, I doubt that's going to happen. If they do bring out a new Switch, I think it would be in 2020, and I think it might have a nicer screen, maybe LED instead of LCD. I don't think it would be a higher resolution screen, because if they bring a higher resolution screen, then that's going to push more pixels, which requires more processing power, and more processing power is going to eat up more battery, which makes the battery die faster and makes if they want to keep that same battery life, which a lot of people complained about when the Switch was first launched. They said 3 hours of battery life to play Zelda, that's stupid. A lot of people complained about that. Having the battery life be even shorter by pushing more pixels and handheld mode would be an absolute disaster. So I don't think that the screen would be any higher resolution. It would probably stick at 720. And it makes a lot of sense for that, because that means that developers don't have to say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to detect handheld mode. And if you're running handheld mode in one of the older systems, then it'll run in 720. If you're running in handheld mode in one of the newer systems, then it'll run at 1080p. And if you dock it, then it's going to do this. I don't think that that's an issue that they want to keep development for the Nintendo Switch easy. And that's what a lot of developers have said about the Switch. They've said development on this is really easy. And if you want to have lots of people make games for your system, you make development easy. So rather than introduce a whole new nest of problems, I think Nintendo will stick with a 720p screen. It might be LED with brighter colors. It might look nicer, but it's not going to be higher resolution, in my opinion. And even if it was, or even if Nintendo had decided to do that, I think that that would be a huge mistake, because I'd prefer myself higher frame rate over resolution any day of the week. Let's talk about what else they might do. I think it's possible that they might put a new chip in there. Now, some people would look at that and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, a new chip in the Nintendo Switch. Well, that would mean that they could push the graphics so much more." The Nintendo Switch is not a system that is being sold to people because of the graphics. It's being sold to people because of the amazing first party games, the really good third party support, and the fact that you can either plug it into your TV or take it with you. It's not about the graphics. If you want to buy a system that has beautiful graphics, not that the Switch doesn't have beautiful graphics, because my God, some of the games look amazing on there. But if you're looking for a game that has the best graphics, then you want to get either a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One X. That's your option if you are interested in graphics above all else. So why would Nintendo replace a chip if they aren't going to go with better graphics? Well, a very, very simple reason. A new chip would be more efficient, allowing you to run the the chip for doing the same exact task as an older version of the Switch, but using less battery. This is something that Apple kind of focused on a while back. They even put it in their presentations where they talked about yes, having a lot of power in your chips is really important, but instead of giving us like cycles per second, what they are more interested is telling us what can you get per watt, because we're continuously moving towards a more portable computing environment, and being able to take these devices with us and have them last all day is very important. I mean, it's not super important for the Switch that it lasts all day because it's a gaming device. It's not there to complete tasks, it's there to entertain. And replacing that chip would allow them to entertain, or as Nintendo would probably put it, bring smiles to the face of their customers for an extended period of time. So I think that that's a possibility for a hardware refresh. Again, I don't think that'll happen this year, probably in 2020. And it's not unlike Nintendo to do hardware refreshes. They don't do it as much with the NES had a hardware refresh for, they had like a top loading NES. The Super Nintendo, I don't know if that had a hardware refresh. The N64 did not. The GameCube did not. The Wii had a hardware refresh, and the Wii U, I don't believe, had a hardware refresh. But if you look at at their handheld devices, those more consistently end up with hardware refreshes multiple times per life cycle. Things like the DS that had, let's go back a little further. We've got the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color. Some would say that that's a hardware refresh because they could play the same games, just some of them would be in color if you played on the new one. Then you have the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Advance SP. That's where they started going with that clamshell design for the Game Boy line. And then when we had the DS, they ended up bringing out the DS Lite, and then the DS Lite XL. And then with the 3DS, they kind of did those same things again, just refreshing the hardware, finding ways to improve the price at which they would the cost at which they would manufacture these items. And then they would keep the price basically the same and not lower the price unless they needed to, just in order to bring up profits some more. Jay Hartley said, I'd like to see more screen real estate so you can get rid of those bezels. I would agree with that getting rid of the bezels would be good. However, that means that a 720p screen would need to be bigger, and would that look less good? If you look at if you look at the 3DS and compare it to the 3DS XL, those are both the same resolution screen, 240p on both, and it clearly looks better in the 3DS than it does on the XL because those pixels kind of get stretched out. Jay Hartley says the N64 had that expansion pack thing, but that was all. That's correct. It did. So I don't know. I'm curious as to what you guys think of this. I don't see Nintendo doing that in 2019. Possibly 2020, just a hardware refresh. I think the form factor would stay the same because a lot of the form factor depends on the size of the Joy-Cons. And these Joy-Cons, I don't feel like they should be any bigger, and they definitely shouldn't be any smaller. I think that these are a really good size to fit in your hand. And because of the size of these, you want to have the Switch be the same height across. And because it's the same height across, then you would probably want to have it be the same width across. So at the end of the day, the Joy-Con is the determining factor into the form factor of the Nintendo Switch. Could they go Apple's route though, and instead of making it bigger screen, could they just make it thinner? One of the first things that I noticed about the Nintendo Switch when I pulled it out of the box back in March of 2016 was how dense it is. It was a very heavy device. And if Nintendo could make it thinner, then maybe people might like that. But I think what people would like more is to uh, shrink down the internals and then fill the extra empty space with more battery. At the same time, if you do that, you increase the weight of the Nintendo Switch, and now it's not as comfortable to play with. So there's really a lot of factors that would go into any updates. And for the most part, this will be the last thing I say, is I think that perhaps a new chip, perhaps a new screen, but no big changes that the consumer would really notice.